Hi, my name is Begonia and I'm making a video about hemming jeans. There won't be any hacks in this video, although I know a lot exist. This is only about sewing techniques. Hopefully there will be good sewing techniques. So I'm assuming you already know the basics about where to cut, how to fold up a hem, and this is a double hem, so you're folding it up twice. And I'll talk a little bit now about what you're going to need. Of course, a pair of jeans. You're going to need thread. And the thread should be the jeans type thread, which is thicker than the traditional thread. You will also require regular thread. So you'll be using the thicker thread on the outside of the jean leg, in other words, on the top. And in the bobbin, you'll use regular thread. So that's to ensure that you get good tension, because if you use the heavy thread on both the top and the bottom, it's going to just jam up your machine. I've heard about that happening, and of course, it's not necessary. The other thing you're going to need is a jeans needle, either 100, size 116 or size 118. Either one will do. I also use what's called a hump jumper, and that's to get me over the heavy seams. So if you don't have a hump jumper, that's fine. You can either improvise by folding a piece of fabric over, say, 3 or 4 times to match the height of the two seams, the two heavy seams you'll be going over. In other words, the inside, the inseam, and the outside of the jeans. Or if you have a foot that has a little black button with a spring on it, you may or may not know that that spring is used to level the foot as you're going over a heavy seam, for instance. I'm not going to be using one of those because I'm using a hump jumper instead. But if you have one, you may want to check your manual to find out how it works. It's actually quite simple and it works really, really well. And finally, you're going to need a little bit of patience with yourself, the willingness to try it out, and a little bit of confidence knowing that you can do it, even if it's not perfect. So I guarantee you that sewing is almost never perfect. And I've been sewing for many, many, many years since I was a little girl. So I might make this look easy, but I've taken up a lot of pants and seams and jeans in my life, and I've sort of learned a few tricks here and there, which is why I'm making this video. So let's get started. Preparation will be the key to getting started. Make sure that, just make sure that you have the hem properly folded up. I don't recommend you iron it. I know people believe, they say if you iron the hem beforehand, it's better. But for this technique, what happens if you iron it down, you'll the hem will be so nicely flat that you might end up with the bottom feeding faster than the top, and no way to adjust it. So, and the other thing too that happens with ironing is, or pressing even, is that you end up stretching fabric at times. And some of the jeans nowadays have some added fibers that actually make it stretchy. So again, something you don't want. The last thing you want is a hem that has those diagonal wonky lines that you sometimes see on hems when the top feeds the top feeds slower than the bottom. Okay, so why don't we get started, and where to begin? So to begin, fold up your hem twice, pin it properly, and then you're going to have to, in my opinion, hand baste. Now, hand basting takes me about 5 minutes maximum, and that's to do both legs. What that does is it ensures that the fabric feeds properly, top and bottom, and the fabric in between. It also ensures that I don't get hurt, and I can handle the fabric a little bit better, because the diameter of a pant leg is not very much, so it's very difficult to handle if you have straight pins holding it together. So that's my advice. Some people use clips, but I just find clips would also get in the way here. So hand basting, take 5 minutes. It's well worth it. It'll probably save you a lot of time unpicking parts of the seam that don't turn out well. So with that, let's get started. Jeans. Here are the jeans. I've already done one leg. They're my husband's jeans, and I know a lot of people have trouble with the heavy seams, so here's a few tips. First of all, you cut them. Hopefully you know how to do that. Then what I did was I actually basted them. And the reason I basted them is because it is almost impossible to pin them and to run them around the sewing machine without stabbing yourself. And basting just makes handling that much easier. It takes all of 5 minutes. So that's my advice. The other thing I did is I used jeans thread heavy on the top thread, but on the bottom thread, you can't really see, but that's just standard regular thread on the bobbin. Make sure you do that because otherwise it just won't work. Okay, so this is what I wanted to show you. What I did was I'm opening it up again just to show you. I opened the seam and I cut. I don't know if you can see this, but I actually trimmed some of the fabric in there. Actually two layers of it, so that I don't end up with, I guess I would end up with about 8 layers of jean fabric. So when I fold it, it's a lot thinner. The other thing I did, here's a little trick, something else you can do, is you can take a hammer, and I have a very small hammer. It's called a ball peen hammer, and I'm not going to do it right now, but basically I hammered it on a hard surface, and that really helps as well. So of course you have to use the proper needle. Okay, so let's get started. First things first, you have to find the inside leg of the jean. The outside leg it's not where you want to start. The reason you start on the inside of the leg is because when you finish in the end, there might be a little bit of double stitching, and it won't look as perfect as it would if you just continuously stitch all around. So I always start on the inside. I also start right after the seam because it's hard to start at a seam. It's easier at the very end when you go over a seam. It already has some momentum, so hopefully that'll work as well. You can start before the seam, but if you do that, you have to start far enough before that you're not starting right on the seam itself, because that's the toughest part. So let's place the jeans in the machine. All right, so they're in place, as you can see. I'm starting right after the seam. I've also made sure that my tail is out back here and doesn't get caught as I start sewing. And the reason for that is I want to take the tail to the inside of the jeans. When I'm done, I want to be able to pull it in so that nothing hangs out. So I'm going to get started now. Okay, I don't have a great setup for my video. I'm kind of improvising here. So essentially I'm using one hand to hold the camera so that you have a really good angle, and then the other hand to sew. I normally use 2 hands to hold my fabric. So here we go. Here we go. You can go as fast as you can go fast in this part because it's not too thick or to the seam. I'll show you how I handle that. Okay, now we're getting close to the seam. Here we go. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put in what's called a hump jumper. This is a hump jumper. You can also get a red one, and there's different things you could use, but I kind of like this one because it has 2 thicknesses, the thinner and the thicker, depending on the thickness of the seam that you have to go over. I've tested it, and the thin part is good enough. So all I do now is I am going to lift my foot with the needle down so that nothing moves. I'm going to put the hump jumper right underneath, and I'll show you how far, and I put it pretty far in. Well, I'm not quite there yet, hold on. Okay, this is where I actually put the hump jumper. It's right at the seam, and as you can see, what it does is it levels the foot so that it's at the same height approximately as the thickest part of the seam. And I'll start sewing now and show you how that works. You see how it's nice and level, it's not bending, and it allows it to not skip stitches. What's going to happen now, I don't know if you can see that, is the hump jumper is going to fall right off, but I can also pull it right off. I no longer need it. So I can now just keep going. Okay, I'm getting to the harder part, the second seam. And the reason this one's harder is because I can't come at it smoothly. I'm coming in from the side where you can actually see there's a big difference in the thickness. But I see no reason why it won't work. Here we go again. I've put in the hump jumper. I'm going to do this with 2 hands. I'm going to stop the camera for a moment. Okay, hopefully you can see this working now that I've got it almost going. It seems I'm going off a little bit on the side, but not enough to be concerned. Hump jumper will fall off. Did you hear that? It's fallen off. It means I no longer need it. And now as I get to the end, I'm going to pull my thread to the side because I will be pulling it towards the back. And I am going to do a couple of back stitches, but not too many. I don't want to make it too heavy, so I will do one back stitch. Put my threads, and now I'm going to pull this thread to the inside. So the first thing I'm going to do is trim it a bit. We don't need such a long thread. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to flip it over, and I'm going to take the inside thread, which is blue, pull on it until the yellow thread comes in. So it's going to take it's a bit of a trick, but I can do it. That's it. My heavy thread's on, there's hardly anything on the outside to worry about. And now I will just trim them, and that's it. I'll be done. I'm going to take out my basting, and they'll look great. Okay, so what do you think? I think they look really nice. I went over that seam very nicely. Here's the other seam. Looks beautiful on the outside. You see, this is where I started. So it was a little bit of overlap, but that's on the inside of the leg. And this is where I took the thread in, and I'm just going to leave a tiny little bit there, like a centimeter or two. But they're done. They look great. It matches with the original thread that was on the jeans. By the way, if you're wondering what machine I'm using an Elna 680 Plus. It's actually a very large, it's a 9mm machine. And yeah, it's quite nice. And the foot that I'm using is actually the 1/4 inch foot. It comes with this nice, here, I'll show it to you. It comes with a nice 1/4 inch foot with a guide. The guide is great. It's used for quilting, but it worked perfectly for this because it allowed me to do the seam at a 1/4 inch perfectly. So yeah, that's pretty much all I have for today.